tell people first things first, when you're starting a business, and even if it's just in the idea stage, it's never too early to separate your business expenses from your personal expenses. Even if it's just, I have a separate credit card that I only use for business expenses. So if you go to any type of training, you get your food safety manager certificate, you buy some ingredients and products that you're using to test and develop in research and development for the kinds of products that you're going to end up selling. Try to start a record keeping system. It's never too early to start that. It can be in Microsoft Excel. It can be in a spiral 3-ring, it can be a spiral notepad. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you want to take advantage of all those expenses as deductions on your taxes as soon as you can. The other thing that happens, I always joke that if you want to get a food entrepreneur to stop talking, ask them when their day off is, because they have to think about it. And so trying to figure out what your personal boundaries are, and it took me years before I started to make appointments for myself on my calendar to take care of myself or take care of, personal things that I had to do. But try to set up those boundaries, even if you're not 100% successful all the time with maintaining them, and none of us are. At least they hold some space, because you are the most valuable asset of your business, and you need rest, you need fuel, you need to be replenished so that you can be the best creative force for products, the best creative problem solver, the best energetic presenter in front of people that are going to provide you with financing. You are the company presenting, yourself to the world. And so taking care of yourself is a really big part of putting your company in its best light. I also like to set up little goals or appointments for myself. I write a sheet of paper in the morning, and I write, probably 6 things that I must do that day. I get interrupted all the time, but it's just a compass I steer by. Whatever organizational tool you use, you want to think about that. You also want to think about how much time and money are you willing to invest in this idea, especially if you haven't gotten started yet. I ask people all the time, because we have this wonderful idea that we have a big fat crush on, and we're so excited about it, and that's wonderful. But I say to people, okay, if you're still not making money in 2 years, do you still want to be doing this? If and I want to ask people hard questions and really set some boundaries to make sure that how much time and money am I willing to invest. And it might not be a total end game, I will invest X number of dollars, and after those dollars are gone, you could certainly do it that way. You could also say, hey, I have another job, and this is my side hustle that I'm developing, so I'm willing to invest X number of dollars per month, or X number of dollars per quarter, whatever it is. The other last point here, where I say don't eat dessert first. Many folks that I've worked with over the years want to build their website, want to create their packaging, their logo. They want to get involved in all sorts of the pretty consumer-facing parts of it. And I'll say, okay, well, you're selling, cookies, and you're going to sell that cookie for $3. So how much does it cost you to make that cookie, and how many cookies do you have to sell to make $100? And you'd want to do this brutal financial stuff first, and make sure that I saw so many people when I was operating my shared kitchen. They'd come in, they'd start operating, and in 3 months they go, I can't make any money doing this, and they'd leave. And so I tell people, you can't be afraid to be brutally honest with yourself about how good your product is, and what you are and are not willing to do this. As many of you know that are already operating, this is not for the faint of heart. And everybody in every part of the food system is to my mind, just the most inspiring, persevering. We don't have any weak people of weak character in this industry, that's for sure. Okay, so when we talk about the basics of food regulations, the way that the government, federal, state, and local, divides up how they regulate food companies is they look at the food that's being made, the process by which it's made, and its intended distribution. So it's really the what, the where, and the who. And once we know what the answers to those questions are, then the government, whether it's the city of Chicago, state of Illinois, FDA or USDA, decides who's going to be overseeing this particular operation, and then what regulations or food codes would apply based on that. So there's a lot of different things that go involved in figuring out what your jurisdiction is. And so I'm going to give you an example of 5 businesses that all make an apple pie. So the ingredients are the same, the process is the same, the food safety hazards are the same, but where they do that and who they sell it to is going to change who oversees them, right? So if I'm making an apple pie at home, and these are the 5 examples. I'm in a shared kitchen. I have my own pie shop. I'm in some central kitchen, some sort of commissary where I'm wholesaling out, and then maybe somebody else, co-packers or a contract manufacturer, they're making it for me. So if I'm making food at home, and this is currently the way the law is right now in Illinois, is you can have a cottage food operation in your house, and that's legal. The law says you're only selling those apple pies to people at farmers markets. If I'm in a shared kitchen, I can sell things direct to consumer over the internet, and I can also sell things to local coffee shops, local supermarkets, things like that. I can also sell, direct to consumer at pop-ups and things like that. So if I'm at home, I'm supposed to register as a cottage food operation. If I'm in a shared kitchen, I get a shared kitchen user license. If I have my own brick and mortar and I have a pie shop, I'm getting a retail food establishment license. I can sell online. I can sell in my store. I can sell at local markets. If I'm working in a commissary and I'm selling to grocery stores, coffee shops, things like that, then I have a wholesale food establishment license. And then if I'm having somebody make it for me, a co-packer or contract manufacturer, once again, that's a wholesale activity. So there's basically 5 different businesses that have, basically 3 different kinds of licenses. This farmer's market patron gets a cottage food registration. The pie shop and the shared kitchen are a couple different kinds of licenses, and then wholesale. So it's hard to see at the bottom, but you can see that there's like a small little pile of money under the at-home option, and that as you go across this chart, the amount of financial investment things take grows significantly. So as you think about sort of this as a path from, oh, I have an idea, and not all products can be legally made in the home. And let me just say that plenty of people kick it old school and have to do things that are safe but not technically compliant with regulations, right? Vosges Chocolates, Katerina Markov started her chocolate business in her house. That was the only option available to her, and she operated that way for a while. So, the fact that this happens doesn't mean you won't be smart about your business and that sort of thing. But I just urge people to get out of the operating in a non-compliant way as soon as you possibly can. Have a plan for that. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys. So basically what happens here is that whether you're at home in a shared kitchen or in a local brick and mortar, the local health department is going to inspect you. And if you're operating at the wholesale level, it's either going to be the state of Illinois or the Food and Drug Administration that's going to oversee those facilities. And this goes a little bit back and forth depending on how big the operation is and what the nature of the food is as well. So basically, there's a lot of different considerations for figuring out which license you get and who inspects you and who oversees your operation. So the big fork in the road, though, is between retail and wholesale. That's why we talked about those definitions at the very beginning. So when you're overseen by the feds, it's either the Food and Drug Administration or the USDA. When you get involved in interstate commerce, that's wholesale. FDA and USDA get involved. USDA inspects meat, poultry, and eggs. So if you are making a product, let's say you're making a frozen pizza and you're shipping it all over the country, if you're shipping meat across state lines, USDA is going to be involved in your operation. Now, the FDA, in addition to overseeing big food companies like Sara Lee and Pepperidge Farm and stuff like that, they also write something called the Model Food Code. So this is the mothership of food regulations for retail activity. And then state and local health departments then adopt the FDA Model Food Code as their rules and regs. So as you look at the city of Chicago's rules and regulations, they came from FDA. And if you end up going out to the suburbs or moving to a different state or looking at getting engaged in activity elsewhere, everybody starts with the Model Food Code. There's going to be little extra things that every health department adds. You know, Chicago's added stuff on top of the FDA code for shared kitchens, for trucks, for carts, right? Different things like that. But the big body, the major parts of it are always going to be the same. The last point here, the health departments love to kick the can upstairs. You know, regulation comes after innovation, right? The city of Chicago didn't have a shared kitchen user license or a shared kitchen operator license before 2009. They didn't get them until they had 3 private for-profit shared kitchens operating, and they had gone to an online business license application process, and everybody thought, oh, I have to get a business license. So they had all these shared kitchen users signing up for business licenses, and it freaked them out. And then they went, oh, wait a minute, you know, we've got to do something about this. So whenever there's innovation, our health department will try whenever it can to say, oh, this is really the state of Illinois should inspect these people, or the FDA should inspect these people. And this will become important later in the presentation when we talk about how you make decisions about which way you go with your licensing. So in terms of the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago, they're going to use the 2017 FDA code. And if you're wholesale, the state of Illinois uses part of the CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations, which we'll talk about later. Now, in addition to where are you and who are you selling to, there are some other additional red flags that come up sometimes that are really based on food science and the particular hazards that are involved with certain kinds of foods, whether the ingredients or the process triggers something. So if you're going to be canning, or if you're going to be vacuum packaging food, whenever we take all the air out of packaging, we create opportunities for bacteria that don't need air. And all the people that need air, or all the bacteria that need air, are dead. And we give this unfair advantage to anaerobic bacteria. If you're going to ferment things, or if you're going to make juices, ice cream is another one. So on top of the what am I, you know, where am I making my food and who am I selling it to, sometimes you'll run into these extra things. They're all listed out specifically in the code. But I think you just need to remember that, oh, okay, wait, if I make kombucha, I'm going to have a little bit of extra hoops to jump through, as opposed to I'm just a caterer, you know, cooking hotel pans of lasagna to deliver to somebody. Okay, so that's the basics of food regulations. I just want to stop here and see if anybody has any questions.
I did have a question come up. Someone wants to know more about the cottage license. How does that work? What is that all about?
So I think the best resource to read about this is the Illinois Stewardship Council. And if you just Google that organization, they do a lot of lobbying around the cottage food law. Illinois was one of the last states to adopt a cottage food law where you were allowed and permitted to start a food business in your home. And so there's a very specific, it used to be they listed the specific foods you were permitted to make at home. They've since changed that because food people are so creative, and they have a list of specific things you cannot do, right? So the kinds of things that you can do in the home are safe stuff, right? Like you can bake blueberry scones, you can bake pies. You can do lots of different kinds of baked goods or pastries, provided they're not dairy filled, because dairy products have an additional risk of listeria, so they're not going with that. You can't make things that are like you couldn't do barbecue or anything with raw meat or poultry, stuff like that. So so there are some of those things, and there's some changes on the horizon. Right now it says that you're only allowed to sell this food at farmers markets, and that once your revenues exceed, I believe it's $25,000 annually, then you have to go find a shared kitchen or some other commercial facility to be able to continue to produce and expand your business. There's a state representative in Chicago, his name's Will Gazzardi, who's a great ally of local food. And he actually has introduced a new bill that's passed in the Illinois State Senate, and it's now on to the Illinois House right now, that's going to permit cottage food operators to go beyond just farmers markets and sell beyond just that single channel. So the Illinois Stewardship Council has more information about that law, but it's coming up for a vote in the House, and they'll actually have some good information about how you can contact your state reps and say, hey, we need this. Zena Marie has a lot of really big fat opinions about whether or not you should register with the city of Chicago as a cottage food operation. I have to say that personally, I struggle to reconcile myself to signing a form that lets the government kick in my front door of my house. So I tell people to think long and hard about registering for this, because if there's ever a problem or ever any kind of complaint, the government has permission to enter your home. And I just, I don't know, that gives me pause personally.
I put the link to their website in the chat here. If folks want to look more into that. If you go to that website and type in cottage in their search box, it will pull up information. There is a comment in the chat from Tony, looking for some clarification. Interstate element of requiring FDA oversight for online retail sales, as this may cross state boundaries. My understanding is this falls under state oversight because it is still retail direct to consumer. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is accurate. I can tell you that the state, the FDA, and the city have been in some very robust debates with all their attorneys about who should be overseeing direct to consumer companies that are shipping nationwide. Because some of them, and there's one on this in Canaryville called Tovala, and they ship meals, they ship tens of thousands of meals every single day out of their 2 facilities in Chicago. And they have a retail food establishment license, and they're enormous. And the city's saying we should not inspect a operation of this size. And the state and the FDA have said they're retail establishments, so it's on you. So that really is what folks decide. Where things get messy is in a shared kitchen, for example. Right now, what's happening in Chicago is if you're engaged in both wholesale and retail activity as a shared kitchen user, which a lot of people are, if you disclose your wholesale activity to the city, they're going to make you register with the state, and then you're subject to the FDA requirements in FSMA, which a lot of people don't know what those are or how to address themselves with that. So I tell people, start with retail first, get your feet underneath you. Shared kitchen licenses allow for both retail and wholesale commercial activity, and you can decide when you've determined that your wholesale activity is becoming meaningful enough that you can prepare for those regulations and register for them. Any other questions?
Didn't see anything else on there. if you guys have any other questions, we'll load them into the Q&A and we'll address them at the next time that we pause.
Okay. So, so the next thing I want to talk about is food regulations and how they impact your business decisions. So deciding what license to get and when to get it is a strategic decision that you make. So how, when, and where you apply, you have choices about how you do this. And I always suggest that people step back and ask themselves, what's your end game here? Because understanding where you want to end up helps you choose the most efficient path that has the least amount of redundancy in it. You have more choices about this than anybody in a health department is going to tell you. And it is, I think, in many ways, it's just as important as knowing your competition, understanding your costs, any strategic, my access to capital, my financing, how much does that cost me? What are my obligations with that sort of thing? It's just as important as that, and can really paralyze your business or really be something that just stays in the background and hums along and doesn't hamstring you as you are trying to run up the mountain. So I'm going to give you an example of 3 businesses that all make salami. So we have the same product, we have the same food safety hazards, and we have 3 different businesses that have 3 different end games here. So the first guy is an Italian restaurant. He's making salami in, his back room of his kitchen, and he's just using it to serve to his restaurant patrons, straight retail. The middle one is a food wholesaler, and you see a lot of this stuff. It used to be a lot more so on Fulton Street, where you'd have a wholesale operator that had a small little retail cash and carry in the front. And then they were also, in addition to wholesaling in-state, they maybe had a regional distributor. And then the last one here is a salami shop that had an end game objective of nationally distributed. I want to be, the top salami provider in the United States. And I'm going to start with both a wholesale and a retail approach. So both of these 3 businesses all have completely different end game strategies for themselves, even though they're making the same product. So when we think about the restaurant and we look at the bottom cell in this table under the salami Italian restaurant, he's getting inspected locally, and he's being inspected locally by the city of Chicago. And so he's going to have a HACCP plan, because making salami is a fermentation process. It requires extra controls, things like that. The middle company, which is engaged in the most diverse amounts of activity, is going to have to get a local license from City of Chicago. And then also, because they're wholesaling, they're going to be registered with the state of Illinois. And then because they're shipping meat over state lines, the USDA is going to get involved as they distribute regionally. So once again, meat, poultry, and eggs is USDA's purview. Now, the last one, the salami shop, and this is a guy, actually, this is a real case of a company called West Loop Salumi that opened on West Randolph Street years ago. And Greg said, I want to be all over the place wholesaling immediately. So he just went right off the bat for a USDA grant of federal inspection. He got that first. And once he got his USDA grant of federal inspection, the state and the city went, okay, have a good time. This is what I mean when I say health departments like to kick the can upstairs. So if you're in a shared kitchen and you're engaged in wholesale activity, and Tim Shackleton comes in and inspects you at the hatchery or, wherever you happen to be working, once you get inspected by the state and you pay your fee to the city's not going to inspect you, because you're a wholesale food establishment and they're going to let the state take care of it. So it's one of those things where, and what I'm talking about is, there may be some exceptions where you get some rogue inspector that gets a little aggressive about things, but this is how the system is laid out. And so when I ask you what your end game is, some people say, I just want to have a little shop on the corner. And somebody else says, I want total world domination. And there can be a million answers in between. We want to understand that a little bit, and you don't have to know it the whole way through. You just have to really know, like, okay, I have a general idea of what I would want to do. I want to operate this thing for 5 years, and then I want to sell it to somebody or whatever it is. Somebody just, I just want to pop in with this question because I want to make sure it wasn't about, there's a question in the Q&A, are there any specific requirements or regulations for baked goods that contain liquor? And the answer for that, I believe, is no, provided everything's baked off, right? If something has an alcoholic content in it, whether it's a food or a beverage, there are going to be liquor laws that apply. But if you make a, some sort of flavored cookie where everything is baked off, I don't believe that's the case. Okay, so getting back to this idea of strategic decision about licensing, you want to think about where you want to end up. And so this next set of examples is really going to be showing you 3 different types of products. We're going to keep with the, the salami example that we had from the previous slide, but then I'm going to talk about making ice cream and making salad dressing. So let's say I have an ice cream company and I'm wholesaling that ice cream, and then I have a retail cash and carry. Because I'm working with ice cream, which has specific laws around it, as all dairy products do, I'm also going to have to get a state dairy license in order to wholesale anything with dairy in it. I'm going to make cheese, I'm going to make milk, I'm going to make ice cream, I'm going to make any frozen dairy desserts that I'm going to wholesale. I'm going to have to get a state dairy license. And I would say to people in this audience, the state has very specific, very expensive equipment requirements for pasteurization of any kind of wholesale dairy product that tend to be cost prohibitive for startup food entrepreneurs. But then you're also going to get your local, you're always going to pay your fee to the local people because they need their money, they need their fees. And then FDA has regulations around ice cream. For salad dressing, if you're going to sell your salad dressing in the salami shop along with all your salami and all your other stuff, once again, he has a grant of federal inspection for his salami, but now he's carrying and making a different product, salad dressing. Now these other agencies are going to get involved again. So the idea of keeping that product line really focused on just the category that USDA would inspect, as opposed to line extensions that bring in these other agencies, you really want to give a thought to, okay, I'm going to have a food company where I'm going to have a lot of different kinds of products that I'm wholesaling. It's always a really good idea to stay in certain general categories so that you don't trigger additional oversight from additional agencies. So that's just a way to keep extra layers out of your place. So once again, licensure is a requirement, but how, when, and where you apply may not be. So I work with folks all the time where we have a lot of discussions about, okay, what are you making? Where are you making it? Okay, you're about to get a shared kitchen. You're about to get an agreement with the shared kitchen. Let's go to the city of Chicago first, but let's not say the wholesale word to the city of Chicago, because if you say wholesale to Anna Nelson and BACP, she's going to kick you to the state and you're going to delay your ability to operate and start testing product and start doing things by many weeks, if not a couple of months. So we want to do, ideally you start with a retail, I'm selling direct to consumer online at farmers markets. That's what I'm doing. You get your shared kitchen license, get your feet underneath you, right? Because there's all these other logistical things you have to figure out. Where am I buying my stuff? Who's going to work for me? How am I going to, where's my storage? Where's my vehicle? You know, you have a lot to figure out about the business without being tangled up in this license stuff at first. And then if you do start to develop a meaningful amount of revenue that's wholesale, you start to look at, there's a lot of regulatory preparation to have under your belts before you register or file as a wholesale manufacturing food operation with the state. So there's lots of ways to, skin this cat. You have a lot of different choices about how you do it. And a lot of it depends on that end game, your resources, what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what the best path is going to be to minimize the amount of time. We want to work for ourselves. We don't want to work for the health department. So we want to look through the lens of these longer term goals. Okay, so it looks like there's some questions, Alexander. I'm going to let you pop back in.
Yes. One question is there any pasteurization requirements for non-dairy frozen dessert, such as vegan ice cream?
No.
All right.
You'd want to make sure, let's say you have, like if you have vegan ice cream, it's going to be creamy from some other way, like nut milks, almond milks, maybe hemp or something else. So you just want to always make sure that you have purchased those ingredients from an approved supplier, and that the health department might want to see letters of guarantee for something like that. Like the supplier gives you a letter and says, yes, I follow all the rules, basically.
Gotcha. Next question, is a dairy license required for any products that contain dairy in general, such as baked goods? So I'm assuming like if there's milk in a cake or some type of pastry.
No. Whenever you heat foods and bake them off, you have a kill step. So dairy licenses are required for things like milk, sour cream, cottage cheese, ice cream, yogurt, cheese, things like that, where the dairy isn't part of another product.
Gotcha. Another question before I get to labeling questions, I think you might address that in a little bit. As a retailer, can I serve liquor infused ice cream item? They do operate out of a shared kitchen.
So I know that there have been a couple of shared kitchen users I've heard of that have applied for liquor licenses. But I would ask Anna Nelson at BACP this question anonymously. I don't know.
So I guess this is my question on top of that. So if I'm using alcohol in any of my retail food items that I'm selling, if I'm not cooking it off, is a liquor license required?
No, I don't think so. But
okay.
And I think that I'd have to say that infusing like an ice cream with some liquor in a small business that kind of stuff is going to go largely undetected, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's an occasional activity that's not widespread in your business, I don't know if I would, like, for me, I don't want to go to the city with and announce an activity unless I know it's going to be a real thing for my business in a big way for a long time.
Yeah, like if I'm like, I want to, start a line of liquor ice creams, like that's my business, booze ice cream, I got Henny vanilla, and like that's my thing.
Yes.
Then that becomes not an issue, but like you'd want to ask the right questions if that is the sole objective of my business.
Central to your brand, as opposed to a caterer who might have a Grand Marnier infused ice cream from time to time on their menu of, dessert options for weddings or something.
Gotcha.
So I think that's right.
Hopefully that answers your question for you, Valentino.
Yeah, I do know that in the festival world right now, the Slurpee cocktail machines are a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And there you have to have a liquor license to do that.
Okay. And this question, again, I think you may be answering this in the next section. Are there any labeling requirements for retail baked goods?
Yes, and we will cover those.
Okay, great. That's all that are in there for right now.
Okay, cool. Thanks, everybody. It's nice to know that you're out there because I can't see anyone.
Yeah, I'm coming off the screen, so you are the star of the show until Q&A time. So take it away.
It is weird to sort of just talk at a blank screen. So thank you for the questions. Okay, so now we're going to talk about production facilities and just go over, the different places where you might make products. So, so if you're making something at home, obviously that's the cheapest way to go. Right now, the cottage food law says I only can sell at farmers markets, and I'll correct myself and say you can sell up to $36,000 in max sales. But once again, the caveat is you are giving the government permission to enter your home with cause. Shared kitchens are the next step up, which require more money, but you're in a licensed commercial facility. It's like being back in college, right? You're going to have roommates and you're not going to like all of them. They can be rough and tumble places. So you have limitations of time and space. Right now, most of the shared kitchens I talk to have some pretty long waiting lists because of what's happened to us in the last year. But a shared kitchen significantly reduces your financial barrier to entry to start a food business. And I will say, as frustrating as it may be to be in a shared kitchen, stay there as long as you possibly can. Don't leave until they're kicking you out the door because you're so big, you're bumping into everybody else, because there's no comparison between that and having your own facility. Because right now, when you're in a shared kitchen, they handle the pest control operating, they handle the security of the building, they pay the insurance on the building, they service all the equipment like the hoods and the walk-in coolers and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that is going to fall on you as the owner once you're in your own place. When you're in your own place, if you are starting to look around at that, or you have a place of your own, if you're going to rent something, commercial leases are not insignificant agreements to enter into, and you want to have some good counsel about a commercial lease and what you want to ask for in it. If you're going to get your own place and rent it, you can always obtain what's called a shared kitchen supplemental license. So if you had your own place and you were leasing it, you could get a license where you could have a roommate or two in your place. And maybe based on the physical configurations of something you're looking at, you could have another business in there with you that works at different times or works on different days. There is a bigger financial risk, but once again, you're going to maintain everything. When you're renting a building, the landlord typically maintains what's called shell and core. So if there's a hole in the roof, it's on the landlord, but all the equipment is on you. So if your HVAC breaks, you're going to fix it. If your walk-in cooler breaks, you're going to fix it. There's a lot of stuff about the operational maintenance of the facility that's going to fall on you that maybe if you were in a shared kitchen previously was there. Contract manufacturing is a capital intensive way to go, because basically you're hiring somebody to make the product for you and you are actually purchasing the production run. So they'll spend some time developing the product to scale. And when you're scaling products up at larger volumes, it becomes a completely different thing than doubling a recipe. And so they have R&D departments that will get the product the way you want it. And then they're going to have what's called an order minimum. And usually it's about as much product as you can fit in a semi truck. So you are going to be on the hook to buy that whole lot from them when they buy it. So some examples of local Chicago products. If you've ever been in Urban Belly or Belly Q, Bill Kim's Korean barbecue restaurants, he was making sauces in his restaurants that now you can buy in supermarkets. And when he first started doing that, he would wait until he had a large enough order from a chain of supermarkets before he would go then and have it made. Because once you have it made, then you have to pay to store it, you have to ship it, you are distributing it. So there's a lot involved in that. So when you're thinking about a shared kitchen, location is really like, it's just like, picking a gym. And you want to make sure that you feel good about the people that are operating the shared kitchen. You're going to have at least one certified food safety manager on site at all times. And every shared kitchen that I've ever heard of requires $1 million of liability insurance that the business holds. That costs usually $300 to $500 a year, I think, something like that, depending on the food that you're making. At logansquarekitchen.com, there's a resources page, a resources section of the website. And under operations, there's a real estate agent that understands shared kitchen user insurance. If you're just thinking about this now and you called your home auto bundle insurance agent to talk to them about adding this kind of insurance, they don't understand it, and the underwriters will freak out, and you'll get some outrageously huge quote to get this insurance. But if you talk to somebody who insures shared kitchen operators that are familiar with it, you'll get the right kind of rate for that. And for those of you who are already in shared kitchens, you have to get a little letter from the shared kitchen that says, yes, I have an agreement with Alexander Martin. He's going to make his food in my kitchen, because Alexander then needs to take that to the city when he applies for his shared kitchen user license. And so there's almost always an agreement where you agree to terms. You agree to how you're going to behave in the kitchen, how you're going to pay your bill, and what the consequences are if you don't maintain those rules. Now, if you have your own place, you're going to be responsible for paying all the utilities. Minimal design and retrofits are common. And if you're looking at sort of new construction or construction in a vanilla box, I tell people $300 to $325 a square foot for construction, which is really insane, because when you think about it, that's saying that if I want to walk into a vanilla box that's 1,000 square feet, I'm going to spend 300 grand to build it out for food. And if it hasn't been built for food before, you are going to spend that kind of money, because you have to saw cut floors, you have to put plumbing in the floor, you have to have that stuff inspected before you can close it up again. You're going to have to pull permits. You're going to have architects do drawings. You're going to have to upgrade utilities. You may have to add additional electrical service or gas service to this building. So it really is not for the faint of heart. I tell people all the time, find a place that's always been food or was food the last time it was occupied, because there's all sorts of infrastructure in that building now that you can take advantage of. I have a client that makes salty snacks, and they've been operating for 2 years, and they were in a teeny tiny kitchen up in Evanston, and they kept asking me to look at buildings for them because I do construction too, and they kept showing me these vanilla box warehouses, and I'm like, why would you spend $500,000 on someone else's building to rent? Go find a building that was food before. And they did, and they found a 10,000 square foot facility. I think we spent $75,000 on just the construction retrofit for 10,000 square feet. And then we spent another $60,000 in equipment. And that's for a year and a half old company that just makes one kind of product. So it is something that, we all think about making this as cheap as possible, but you also have to think about how much volume do I have to produce in order to make a go of it with this business. So that's why shared kitchens are so valuable, because you can wing walk your way up in volume, and you're building a brand presence and you're building a following before you have the burden of your own facility. Now, if you are looking for a place the very first thing you want to do is check the zoning and see if what you want to do in that building is permitted. And if you just Google City of Chicago zoning map and you enter an address of what you're looking at, you can look for what the zoning is for any given place. And then when I tell people, if you're looking at buildings, ask people if there's 3-phase power in the building. Ask people how many amps of electrical service are in the building. You know, ask, is there gas service to the building? Is it 2 inches, is it 3 inch? You want to find out stuff like that, depending on what you're doing. Now, if you're Veruca Chocolates and you just need electricity because you have chocolate temper machines and you don't need a hood and you're not making food, your equipment needs are very different than somebody who wants to put smokers in there like Blackwood Barbecue. So what you need depends on what you're making or what other kinds of, if you're doing a shared, if you think you're going to share sometime, what would the needs of other people be? So when we think about co-mans, when you get to a certain volume, it's nice for them to scale recipes. It's a critical skill to make sure that your product stays really, really consistent when you start to ramp up your volume. You could also only outsource a portion of your process, right? So you might, rather than shipping off everything start to finish to a co-man, you could say, I'm going to make my product, but I'm going to ship it out to be packaged and labeled, or I'm going to ship it out for final assembly. Or I'm going to go ahead and have somebody else grind and stuff my meat for my salami and then send it back to me, and I'm going to ferment it, I'm going to age it, I'm going to dry it. There's a really big gap in our food system for what I would call our small batch co-packers, people that will have a lower approachable order minimum for small business, food businesses. I think that that's a huge, huge need. It does require a significant financial commitment. And the other thing about co-mans is they have access to the kinds of process authorities and food scientists and people that can help you with shelf life studies or testing and different things like that. Okay, so questions about production facilities. Looks like we got some.
Yes, we have a couple. I'll go with the first one that has to do with commercial kitchens. Is it legal to build a commercial kitchen as a home addition?
I would say probably not, because your home has a residential home has a residential zoning, and a commercial kitchen is going to have to be in a commercial or something zoned B for business, C for commercial, I for industrial, or M for manufacturing.
Another question, is there a requirement for putting a small amount of CBD in ice cream?
I know jack about CBD. Sorry.
I would say I'm not sure a good place to get that resource, but we will attempt to send you a message if we are able to find it, because I'm not sure either.
The only person, the two people I think of that might know the answer to that is Mindy Siegel makes pot food, right?
Mm-hmm.
She would likely know, or her business partners would. And then, like, if you walked into any cannabis dispensary, you could ask them about their suppliers, or just look and see what products are in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have to say that because we already know that ice cream is a red flag food, I don't know that I would add CBD, which is another red flag thing, on top of an existing red flag food, and then you want to wholesale that. It's going to, you're piling degrees of difficulty on something that could be challenging.
We had another question. Someone was asking, what was the name of the small batch co-packer that you mentioned?
I don't know if I mentioned anybody specifically. I think there's a place up in the Milwaukee area called Contract Comestibles. And every co-packer is different, right? Like there are some co-packers that You have to go to special co-packers if you want something in glass, right? Because glass is a hazard that has to be controlled specifically. So, you know, people who do salad dressing in glass would be here. And if I'm dealing with like frozen fruit, you know, I go there. I mean, it's always category and hazard specific. It's kind of a, but Contract Comestibles is nearby, and they do smaller batch, and they're sort of a generalist kind of company.
I dropped that link into the chat for you guys. I had a question. Getting back to utilities for establishing your own place. So if you have a walk-in cooler or walk-in freezer, and or a black iron hood, the building, the utility has to have that 3-phase electrical. And
Yes.
if it doesn't, what does that situation look like? Is it that the landlord would get that type of utility hooked up with the tenant? Could the tenant be responsible? Have you seen situations like that?
Well, step one is, where do I begin? Okay, so there was a shared kitchen in Evanston called Now We're Cooking.
Yep,
and they
I use
went in,
that place.
Okay, so there was no walk-in in there
No.
because they couldn't get a 3-phase power to that building.
Got it.
So, and they ran their hoods off single phase, but it was really expensive. So if you don't have 3-phase power going to a building, you have to get the power company involved, and it's really expensive. And the landlord would never pay for that, likely, because it can be a 5-figure change to a building. And so typically, if you were stuck, if you had your heart set on that location, you'd figure out how to do everything with single phase power. So the Marion Street Cheese Market in Oak Park is a pretty big restaurant that has no hood because there's no 3-phase there, and they cook everything on induction out there. So, sometimes you have to get creative when you can't get the power. So it's really really a matter of doing your homework on a building. But if you find something that's been food before, it's very likely the 3-phase is there.
Got it. Another question just popped up. So if I were to get my own retail space / bakery storefront, would I be able to rent out the kitchen to other food businesses? Would it then be a commissary kitchen, or would it count as a shared kitchen?
So yes, you can do this. So the way this works is you would first secure your own retail food establishment license from the city of Chicago. And I like to recommend that we only do one thing at a time with the city, because it's faster. It doesn't feel faster, but it is faster to do it this way, and simpler. So after you get your retail food establishment license and you're open and you're operating, then you can apply subsequently for what's called a shared kitchen supplemental license. So it's a supplement to your existing retail food establishment license, and it allows you to then have roommates in your facility. You should be prepared to answer a lot of questions about how many people are you going to have in there? What are they going to be doing? Do you have enough storage for everyone? How are you separating storage and refrigeration and dry? That sort of thing. How are you scheduling things? How are you making sure that the place doesn't get overcrowded?
To that point, I think we were talking about this as we were preparing for this presentation. The key to that is establishing that whoever's using it as a shared kitchen, that there needs to be a separate cooler. Does there needs to be separate dry storage? What are some of the things? Is that where it stops as far as what needs to be separate?
So you can share a walk-in. As long as you can walk in and show the inspector, like, okay, this shelf or these 2 shelves are Joe's and this is mine, and this is how we keep it separate. And then for all of you food managers out there, we still have the health code storage of, we have ready to eat food on top and we have raw poultry underneath and things like that. I think it's always a good idea. When I ran my shared kitchen, everybody had, when they were labeling their products, they would include the initials of their business on each product. So if they opened something and it would be like, you know, CK for Celestial Kitchens with her on her eggs or something like that. That way, if things get mixed up, you could say, this is our extra control. We have designated storage, but we also have each business label their own stuff.
Great. Last question before we move on. When starting your business from home, the next step would be starting from a shared kitchen, correct?
I would say that the answer to that is yes, but I would say don't necessarily only think about a business like the Hatchery or Chicago Smoke or something that has a shared kitchen as its business model. You can Google City of Chicago business license lookup, and you can look for all the businesses in Chicago that have shared kitchen supplemental licenses, right? You may find a catering commissary that is desperate for roommates right now because nobody has big weddings right now for the last year, right? And they want people to come in and rent part of their space out. So that's another place to think about. It might be that you might not be in a big shared kitchen that is marketing itself as a shared kitchen. You may be someone's roommate in another facility, and look around your neighborhood, see if there's places that maybe you could work when they're closed, or maybe they're not far from your house. The other thing that I dream about is people taking advantage of commercial kitchens in churches. There's big commercial kitchens in a lot of churches that get used once a week. Maybe the church would do what they need to do to get a shared kitchen user license, and then, you know, it can get some additional rent and people can work in there. I think that there's all sorts of kitchens out there that sit idle way too much of the time.
Thank you.
Okay.
I put in the chat the link for the business license lookup.
Cool. So the next part of this, we're just going to go through, I know we've run a little over time, but this next part just has a couple slides per section about some things about putting things into practice. So as far as your financial homework is concerned, the big thing I recommend to everybody is, if you haven't done this yet, convert your recipes from volume to weight. You need accurate food costs. This is really going to help consistency and batching as well. You've got to be able to look at weight and look at yield of each ingredient and compute some sort of food costs. Once again, separate your personal and business expenses to the extent that you can. And you want to start computing a cost of goods sold for your product. And include your time, you know, budgeted at least $15 an hour. And eventually you're going to want somebody besides you to be standing over that table making this food. You've got to start to include labor and see how much money you're losing in the beginning and that sort of thing, because we as food entrepreneurs have a very hard ceiling on, you know, no one's going to buy a $28 brownie, right? Well, maybe if there was some really fun stuff in it, but you know what I mean. So we know there's a hard ceiling because of our competition in the food space. So you're going to be looking at hitting that hard ceiling as you figure out how much can I charge for my food, and then, you know, what are my costs. So this, you can't start doing this early enough. You're going to have some fixed startup costs, even if you're starting in the home, even if you're just, you know, working out of your house. If you form an LLC, make sure you put the date you created or form the LLC on your calendar. Millions of people will ask you for that in the wildest times, but you also have to file an annual report every year. And if you miss that, instead of being $75 to file your annual report, it's like $250. And then if you totally forget, the state will dissolve your corp and you have to reopen it, and it's a hot mess. And when I started my LLC, I went through this pain because no one told me that I was going to have to maintain a corporation annually, and give yourself the time for the bookkeeping that you're going to really need. So before I go on to labels, it looks like there's one question that popped up. It might be related to this section, Alexander. Oh, no, it's you. Okay, never mind.
No, you're talking about the labeling question?
No, but now I'm back on track. So when we talk about labels, anytime anybody, wholesale, retail, doesn't matter, puts food in a package, that food must be labeled. So whether you're selling a cupcake in a clamshell at a farmer's market, or you're packaging TV dinners that you're selling to Fortune Fish Wholesale, you're going to have at minimum these 5 things on your label. You're going to have the common name and the quantity or weight, and that always has to be on the front facing label. Sometimes people have labels front and back, right? You buy Cheerios. Underneath Cheerios, which is the brand name, you'll see toasted oat cereal in little letters because there has to be a common name on that box. The weight is at the very bottom of that front facing box, and then all sorts of other stuff's on the back. For instance, a whole list of your ingredients in descending order by weight. Once again, convert your recipes to weight, right? You're going to have an allergen statement after your ingredient list that's going to say this contains milk, shellfish, nuts, whatever one of the big 8 allergens are. And then the name and the address of the manufacturer. If you are working in a shared kitchen in the city of Chicago, the municipal ordinance, which is the law, says you're going to have the shared kitchen address on your product. I tell people, even if you're making something in your house, I recommend that people never put their home address on a label. I would say go ahead and put your website address or, a post office box, something else. I would never put a home address, even if you're making it in your home. So a lot of people ask me, don't I have to put nutritional information on my labels? So the answer is small businesses are exempt from having nutritional labeling on their packaging. It's required after you have more than 10 people working for you, more than 50,000 in sales. And there are, these slides are available on my website on the latest blog post. So these links will work there. Now, if you wanted to have nutritional information on your product, even though you were exempt, Recipal.com is a website where you input your recipe and it calculates your nutritional information for you. And it's just a nice free tool that a lot of people use. And he's a great guy, and he's got a lot of other services on his website with respect to things, support for food businesses. Now, I will say the other time when you might be required to have nutritional information on your labels is if you sell into Whole Foods, for example. Whole Foods will tell every single company that's in its store, if you want to be on our shelves, you're going to have nutritional information on your labels. And that's a requirement of that particular store. So sometimes your wholesale customers, your retailers, will require things of you that the government does not. And that's becoming more and more common in the last few years. So when we talk about allergens, anytime we put food in a package, it must have this allergen statement. And there's an example here of, here's all my ingredients in descending order by weight. And then the allergen statement comes below it, contains milk. Now, even though milk is mentioned, a few different forms of milk are in the ingredients. Yes, this is a redundant statement of any of the big 8 allergens that are in here. And so the 8 allergens are listed on the left, and we always want to make sure that we have this here. I will tell people that you never want to say contains dairy. FDA says you always use the common name, so you're always going to say contains milk. So I've seen chocolate producers be forced to recall food, lots of product, because it said contains dairy instead of contains milk on their labels. And over 85% of all the food recalls in the United States are because allergens have not been declared on the label properly. So it's not because everything's tainted with E. coli or whatever. It's really, there's the allergens on the label, you're going to call it back. Now, sometimes you see labels that say may contain nuts, or also produced in a facility that, you know, contains wheat and soy or something like that. You're seeing fewer and fewer of these statements as time passes, because FDA is starting to say you don't get to be a little bit pregnant. Either you're controlling for allergens and they're not in your product, or they're going to be declared as an ingredient in there. So there are all sorts of federal allergen controls that are in place now, where the FDA wants to see what are the allergen controls in this facility to make sure that we don't have cross contact between products that, like, how do you make sure that the next product that's produced on this line for product number 1 that has a bunch of milk in it doesn't get into product number 2? How are you making sure that doesn't happen? Now, if you're a caterer or a restaurant, you're not packaging your food, you're delivering things in hotel pans, or, you know, you're making meals, you're making grab and go meals, you're dropping things off. I would still recommend, since more and more caterers are dropping off these days, that you have an ingredient statement with an allergen statement on your food. I think disclosing all your ingredients, I mean, even when you buy prepared foods in the supermarket, they have ingredients listed. And then the other thing is to include some sort of safe handling instructions if you're not going to have staff serving things or handling things at a catering job. So you want to make sure that all the allergens are reflected on the label, and sometimes our ingredients have allergens that we don't typically think of off the top of our head. For example, there's wheat and soy sauce, there's sardines and Worcestershire sauce. So you really want to make sure that you all are also aware of the allergens that are in your ingredients, and make sure that you disclose those too. Okay, before we go to traceability, I think I just want to check. Okay, great. So when we talk about traceability, so federal regulations for big food say, if you're making food that's in the supermarket, as an example, I must be able to trace 1 step backward and 1 step forward. So that means that if there's some link in the food system chain that becomes contaminated, each one of the links in the chain can go, I got it from here, I sent it there, and we can always trace forward and back where things went. So if you're making something that's packaged and you're wholesaling it, the state of Illinois, when they come to inspect you, is going to look for your lot coding system. They're going to want to know how you code your lots that go out, and that you know where they go. With people that are doing catering or restaurants and you're doing ready-to-eat foods, what's most likely going to happen is you're just going to want to keep good track of your ingredient invoices, or your invoices for all the product that comes in. And you want to just make sure that you keep good files in chronological order. It's pretty easy to know that if I catered a party on May 11th today, and I can look up my invoices for my ingredients for whatever the products I got on May 10th or May, whatever 7th was, Friday, something like that. But FDA regulations, if you're wholesaling, more and more often, the state, if you're wholesaling, is going to say, we want to know how you're tracing product. Now, traceability requirements in the federal code do not apply to small businesses. If you're under 50 employees, traceability and recall systems are not mandatory. But it's never too early to get some simple rudimentary things in place for that. In terms of transportation, especially if you're doing things at home or you're working in shared kitchens, wherever you are, you might be buying your own stuff at Restaurant Depot or Costco or farmers markets and transporting to festivals or gigs or pop-ups or whatever. Make sure that you think about the methods that you have for transporting that food. Do I have good enough coolers? Do I have ice in those coolers? You know, what's my travel time? What's the traffic going to be like? This stuff doesn't just impact food safety, it can impact your food quality of your end product. And so we really want to keep those ingredients stored in a way that keeps them as integrous as possible. And then also, if you're delegating your delivery to other people for the last little leg of it, it's often a good idea to, you know, to have a friend be a little secret shopper and get your stuff and, you know, find out what kind of shape it gets in when it gets delivered. Now, in terms of record keeping, safe transportation, food regulations vary depending on who oversees you. I would say that keeping good transit records for food are important. If I'm a caterer that delivers meals to schools, I'm required to do it. It's a real good best practice for caterers. If you're working a festival in the city of Chicago, if you were going to be at Taste of Chicago or something like that, transportation records are required at festivals by our city. It's the #1 food gets destroyed at festival because vendors can't produce a transportation log. I can tell you that there's a $50 Dixon data logger that you put an app on your phone and you set how often you want it to record temperatures. You throw this little brick that looks like one of those little ice bricks that you throw in your freezer to get cold and put in your cooler. You throw it in your coolers when you're transporting stuff, and you can wave your phone over this data logger and get your record. So you can instantly get a transportation record and see what's going on during transportation without having to have a clipboard and a pen and where's my thermometer and, you know, is it accurate and all that other kind of nonsense. It's, you know, for $50, it eliminates a lot of issues. So with that in mind, it's really just a conclusion slide here that says, you know, think about, you know, the amount of time, money, and what your limits are in your resources for your business. If you, no matter where you are, if you're not starting yet, do your food safety manager certification as soon as you can. It lasts for 5 years and it takes longer than anything else in the early stages to get going. So, you know, get that class done. I actually just saw recently that ServSafe now has partnered with a remote proctoring organization, so you can take your class and your test virtually now, which is, you know, eliminating the problem of trying to find somebody to proctor an in-person exam. Insurance we talked about, and I would just say, I would find people that are going to be brutally honest with you about your product. You know, this is a really competitive field, and you want folks to really not just blow smoke about how great your stuff is, but really be very critical about, you know, how good it is, what's the price to value proposition versus other things I could buy instead. You know, that sort of thing is important. And then maybe we'll do a little bit like a pause for questions. And then before we depart, I'm just going to, I want to show you a couple things on the Logan Square Kitchen website, but I'm not sure.
I have a couple of questions for you. So if I wanted to sell sandwiches out of a container in Boxville, assembling those sandwiches on site, so it could be hot or cold sandwiches using a panini griddle, what licenses, permits would I need?
So I think what I would do if that were the circumstance is I would think about getting a pop-up license, because Boxville's not 12 months a year, is it?
There is a pop-up vending market that will be starting, that's for a certain amount of time throughout the year. But there are retailers that operate all year round.
Right, but this panini guy would be, so because if you do a pop-up license, you're not subject to all of the hand sinks, 3-comp sinks, brick and mortar stuff. You wouldn't be subject to having necessarily to use another shared kitchen or commissary. Boxville would have to get a pop-up host license for the container that they're letting people pop up in.
Mm-hmm.
And then whoever is in that box would get a pop-up user. So if you go to logansquarekitchen.com, on the resources section, there's this regulations page. And right here, there's Chicago pop-up licenses. And this page actually shows you how it works. And food is allowed to pop up. So this is, and then I think there's a bunch of fact sheets down here. So the pop-up user fact sheet goes through what happens with pop-up food users. It looks like is a tier 1 license. So you'd have to read through this a little bit, but I think that's the way I would go, because if you do something else, you're going to get into all the brick and mortar food regulations. I guess maybe, is Boxville a market technically?
They've changed the rules on, so there's farmer market permitting that was what was used before, but we are no longer considered a farmer's market. So now we get special events permitting, which is a little bit different. So I'm working with the city now to get the proper permits for our vending for this summer.
Got it. So Alyssa Baum doesn't oversee you anymore.
No, she does farmers markets only, I believe.
Right.
And
right.
So with the, actually, I'll ask you it's a longer question that I'll clarify with you afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. The other way to go is you could just get a festival vendor application in,
Mm-hmm.
and then in that case, your food would have to be like prepped in a commissary kitchen and then transported, and you could do that last minute panini press preparation at the festival.
Great. What are certifications needed for food trucks to sell alcoholic drinks?
Yeah, liquor's not my thing, sorry. I can't imagine. I mean, this city is so anti-truck. I would talk to a, because liquor licenses come from the state, even though you apply through the city. Once you get your city license granted, you have to get your state liquor license to be able to buy liquor wholesale.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole thing. So yeah, I have no idea.
Looks like we have someone from the SBDC chiming in. To our knowledge, you cannot sell liquor on a truck, food truck.
I've not heard of it.
Let's see. Can you speak to the nutritional labeling requirements around things like gift boxes, where you could have a consolidated label on the front of the box or a printed card inside?
So, well, first of all, I think you could really figure out what is going to work best for you in that case. I think on a printed card inside would be fine. if you're repackaging, like if you're buying something in bulk and then repackaging it into smaller portions for your gift basket, yeah, I might just do a consolidated thing rather than label every individual item in that gift bag.
Gotcha.
So, and I'll just go back really quickly to logansquarekitchen.com. So at this website, under the About section there's a place called Blog. And if you see here, the presentation that we have, you're going to have to click on Read More, but then there's a link here where you can see the presentation slides we reviewed today. So that's where that's for you guys. There's a lot of good resources here about the food regulation, shared kitchens, stuff like that. If you're looking at different kinds of training for your people, we do offer online food handler, sexual harassment, allergen, and Bassett training. Tonight is my last class in Chicago Festival certifications. So that's happening for the last Tuesday night tonight. But if SBDC finds they have enough people and they want a class later in the year, we'd certainly do that. But there's definitely a lot of stuff. I'm going to be catching my breath this summer. So at the end of May, I'm going to be checking out until October 1st, taking care of my mom. And I was forced to relocate due to the pandemic. I'm trying to catch my breath. But I just want to take a minute and thank Alexander, because he was so generous with all his time and insight in helping me develop this for you guys. And I couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much, Alexander, for all your support. It's wonderful to work with you.
Likewise, I've taken a bunch of notes myself, so I always learn something from you every time that we chat. And we're super grateful at Build Bronzeville and the Bronzeville Culinary Connection to have you as a resource. Hey guys, trust me, I call her and email her often to figure things out, and I will be reaching out to her to nail down some things. But Zena, thank you so much for taking the time to put this together. I found it super valuable. I hope everyone out there did. I appreciate everyone hanging in there a few minutes afterwards, but this information, I think, will save people a lot of time. And if you're saving time, you're probably saving money. I know I got some good notes. Remember, you are the most important asset to your business. Find out what your end game is. And from there, you really can navigate the right path through your business and achieve all that you look to accomplish. So on that note, thank you guys so much for attending. Please follow us on our platforms. Check out logansquarekitchen.com. It is .com, not .org, correct?
Correct.
She has there will be a PDF of this presentation. There's lots of links. If you want to know information about the city, don't go to the city website. Go to her website first. She's verified everything personally with the city. Sometimes their items are outdated. So go to her site first and then take it from there. So thank you guys again. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Zena. And we'll be talking soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.